Let's introduce our panel for today. We have Karen Farrell Ingram, how are you? And we have Jeff McQuilkin, and we have Chris Langley. All right. So let's start with Karen. Do you mind just telling us each of you just telling us where you're from and what you do?
Sure. I'm from Eastern Sierra Land Trust. I'm the executive director there. We're based in Bishop, and I live just a little bit outside of Bishop.
Thank you.
I'm Jeff. Once again, I'm the executive director of the Mono Lake Committee, and we're based at Mono Lake in Lee Mining, and also work in a lot in Los Angeles because we're connected by water issues in the Los Angeles Aqueduct. I grew up in Southern California, down here, and been at Mono Lake for about 20 years.
And I'm Chris, and I'm here because of the stewardship group for the Alabama Hills that I began. But I began that because I am the film commissioner, work with filming up there, and I am also a film historian, and we built and opened a museum, a film history museum in Lone Pine, which is where I live.
Great, thank you all. So I'm going to start talking to Karen first. My first question for you is, what areas do the Eastern Sierra Land Trust protect?
Well, our service area is Inyo, Mono, Alpine counties of California, and then Eastern Sierra portions of western Nevada. So I assume everyone knows where the Eastern Sierra is here, and we don't have to go there probably. But so we work in those areas. We focus on private land conservation. So we partner with willing landowners, farmers, ranchers, other people who have lands that have special resources on them.
And what are the main priorities of ESLT?
Well, we kind of split our work within 3 program areas, and that is critical habitats. That's looking at wildlife habitats such as migration corridors, wetlands, those types of places, breeding grounds. So we focus on critical habitats. We also work on working farms and ranches. So we don't work on them, we help protect them. And so we have a lot of wonderful ranches and farms in the Eastern Sierra, cattle ranches, alfalfa farms. So that's one of our focus areas. And we also have a community connections program where we're working to bring people on the land and kind of connect them to those special places through field trips, educational programs, seminars, that type of thing.
You say educational programs. Do you mind, what are the educational programs? Is it through college or high school? Or?
No, it's we have a partnership with a school out near one of our conservation easements, so that's an elementary school. And I have Victoria Ortiz here, who's our education coordinator, and she has developed and worked this year on some really cool outings for the kids to get them comfortable with binoculars and bird watching and that type of thing. So we do some school programs. We have a sunflower garden at our office where we have third graders and a 4-H group coming to learn about pollination and germination and get their hands dirty and learn what pill bugs are and chase down grasshoppers and all those kinds of things. So we really have a wide variety of educational programs that are mostly focused on the lands that we help preserve, so the special resources that are out there.
Yeah, that's great. And so how does the trust sustain itself?
Well, we have about 750 supporting members, about half in our region around Bishop and that area, and then about half in Southern California. So that is a big portion of our support. And then we go out and get grants from foundations and government entities to preserve land through easements and acquisition.
That's great. And just real quick, does everybody know what an easement is? Is everyone aware of an easement? It's do you mind defining an easement a little bit? Because I know our staff, we kind of had conversations about easements specifically.
Yeah, it's thrown around a lot, and I think maybe many people don't know what it is, but it's simply a legal agreement with a landowner that's negotiated to determine and set out what can be done on a certain piece of property in the future. So it ends up being a 25-page document that lays out the future uses of the land and the restrictions on that land. And so typically it restricts future subdivision of land. So it parcel, and maybe that's a ranch where someone's raising cattle and doesn't want to develop their land anyway, so we will come in and find a way to purchase their development rights, and they can go on with that business, and the land stays open for grazing and for wildlife. And it's permanent, so if the land changes hands, the easement stays on the property.
I just have one follow-up question about that. You just said so. You said like ranchers and farmers. I mean, does it matter? Do you notice like more success with one thing versus the other? One kind of piece of land is it easier to work with, or like what's the sort of the differences between like with the different pieces of land that you've got?
Yeah, there really is a difference, and I think that's a good question. Typically, when we're working with farmers and ranchers, those are working lands, and so they have a business on that land, and they're very business oriented. So it will work out, pencil out, so to speak, for them to work with us and to be compensated for not developing, and they can then take that money and put it back in their business, and it's all very business oriented. And then you've got some people like a landowner that Jeff knows well in the Mono Basin. She's had this land for 50 plus years. She just loves it. She's in her 80s. She doesn't want to see anything happen to that in the future. So for her, it was really coming from the heart that she wanted to make sure that land was going to be there for the wildlife and for the people that live there now, the caretakers forever. So she donated her conservation easement. So there's two ways that people can go. They can sell their easement, and we need to go out and get grants to purchase that, or they can donate it, and they may qualify for tax benefits in that case. So
that's great. What conservation issues is the trust working on at the moment?
We've got a number of projects in the works. One of the things that is starting to get more of our attention is the sage grouse. So does everybody know what a sage grouse is? It's a chicken-like bird. It's so cool. It's a kind of large bird.
Do you eat them?
Yeah, I don't, but some people do. And this bird has been declining in the West over the last decades, and so it's actually up to be considered for listing as an endangered species. And it's this really fascinating bird that they have these ancient breeding grounds called leks, that's L-E-K, where they go every year to the same place, and the males display, and they do this incredible display where they puff out their chests and they make this weird sound, and so it's just a really cool process. And apparently, for a number of reasons, it might be climate change, development, predators, they're really declining, and so we've been starting to enter into some work where we're helping preserve those birds through conservation easements, and they actually coexist very well with ranching and grazing, and so by preserving some of the ranches in our area, we're able to preserve the habitat for these birds. So that's a big issue that we're getting involved with.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to move on to Jeff. Thank you, Karen. Jeff, what kinds of wildlife does the Mono Lake ecosystem sustain?
Well, Mono Lakes, we say it's unique.
Yeah.
It's overused, but it really is a unique ecosystem. I mean, many of you probably are familiar with Mono Lake, but just in the thumbnail sketch, it's a salt lake because there's no outlet stream, so the water comes from the snowpack and down the streams. There are tributaries of the lake, and then it stays there only by evaporation. So it's about 2.5 times as salty as the ocean that we have right here. It's also alkaline, and that means your average picture of a lake and fish swimming around is not what Mono Lake is at all. Fish can't survive there. You have brine shrimp and alkali flies instead that love salt lakes. 4 to 6 trillion brine shrimp out there, the size of your thumbnail. And what that does is it creates a very different ecosystem than you normally have for a lake. And if you are a bird flying by and thinking about nesting or migrating and looking for some food, you basically have a 75 square mile bowl of soup right there in front of you to land in. So it's a very simple ecosystem of the lake, and it supports a tremendous abundance of wildlife. About 85% of the California gulls, or particular species of gulls in the state, will actually fly from the coast here and nest at Mono Lake, and then return to the coast in the wintertime. About 30% of the world's population of ear breed leaves, which is a duck-like diving bird, come through and molt all their feathers and then continue their migration southward after spending time on the ground. So it's really a different kind of place, and that's I think one of the attractions of it. Also, I just usually remind people of how big it is, and I was doing a little comparison since we were here, and I calculated it's about 12 miles, 13 miles across. So if we got our kayaks out, and we're here at the gallery, and we jumped into Mono Lake, we would paddle all the way to the Staples Center downtown before we got out to the other side of Mono Lake. So I think you get a sense of the size, tucked away up there.
Wow. So another interesting thing about Mono Lake is that it has a story of excessive water diversions to LA and public action, landmark water rights decisions, and ecological restoration. Where do things stand today, the Mono Lake story?
Well, there's a fascinating and long story, which I could go on for about a length. Things are getting better in Mono Lake today, and I think that's one of the upshots. It's an environmental story that's received a lot of publicity because of the diversions of the city of Los Angeles and the tributary streams that began back in the 40s. And were really quite destructive because LA didn't just take some of the water, they took all of the water from the tributary streams. So this wasn't really a balance question, this was an all or nothing issue. Dry the streams up and then cause the lake to go down because it had less water. And so places like South Tufa, which is in this wonderful photo here, and so forth, have been revealed as the lake is about 45 vertical feet lower than it once was, has the this raised a lot of concern over the state Mono Lake bumper stickers. There were all kinds of efforts made by the committee, my organization, which was started back in 1978 by David Gaines and Sally Gaines, to draw attention to this problem and really highlight what hadn't been seen before, which was the impending ecological collapse of this lake and the migratory birds and the things that supported it. In a nutshell, there were a lot of legal issues and public action and so forth, but the outcome has actually been successful in Los Angeles as water rights have been rebalanced with the needs of the lake. So LA, which needs water, of course, gets some, but the lake also gets some water. There's a long-term management level that's been set for the lake that will protect it at an ecologically sound level, though about 25 feet lower than it would be naturally, because that represents the share that will continue to Los Angeles. So things are getting better, but we often point out, I brought a few props to show that mostly we've won a lot of great things on paper, and some of them are taking place, but a lot of times you take decisions and plans like these. This is the stream channel restoration plan. How do you bring a stream back to life after 40 years of being dry? And you can write a great plan down on paper, and then it needs to get done. And you really want to see fish and birds and trees come back to life. And working with Los Angeles is an ongoing adventure in continuing vigilance for our organization, and that's a lot of what we're engaged in today.
So the challenges that are facing you today with Los Angeles, can you talk to me a little bit more specifically about what those challenges are?
Well, the city's responsible because the water diversions are historically caused the lake to go down, the streams to dry up. They're responsible for releasing water in new balance that was struck, but also doing restoration programs. So they have to restore the tributary streams and the lake. And I would say they've been following through on this, but as a water utility, this is not the primary job that they have or the primary skill set that they have their people to do. And so getting that restoration done, getting it done in a complete way so that it really is a thriving ecosystem on the Mono Lake level is the end of the outcome is the ongoing challenge. There's a lot of science, there's a lot of hands-on work. It could be anything from us providing volunteers to do tree plantings and kind of the easy end of things to be in a semi-courtroom setting debating whether the next $50,000 should be spent on this or that project, or managing aqueduct operations in one way or another. And the goal, of course, being to get to that endpoint point, which is probably decades away, where you have a restored lake and streams, and LA's still getting their water, but it's all running together in some harmonious way.
And you say decades away, like, how many decades?
You can spend decades debating that question. If you look at well, there's sort of two issues. I mean, how long will it take for Mona Lake to rise to its long-term management level? The current forecasting is 17 years on average from today. So there's that, and I'm getting to the lake level. And then the other question is how long would it take to restore the channels and the streamside forests that really literally disappeared on the tributary streams. And you're probably having, if you really want to look at a fully structured streamside forest, big trees, and full kind of habitat, you've got to let big trees grow. So it's going to take another 50, 60 years. But to really put things on track and make sure you're going in the right direction, a lot of the work that's happening now with stream flow and how LA releases it and when and in what manner is a key part of probably the next 10 to 20 years we'll get there on track. It's remarkable, I'd say it's remarkable how much recovers just by adding water back to the system.
Right.
And that's amazing, but it does take time.
Thank you so much. I'm going to speak to Chris now. Thank you, Joe. Chris, how are you?
Good. How are you?
The Alabama Hills is famous for Hollywood movies, as you mentioned earlier. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the Alabama Hills?
You mean the movie history?
Well, both. Yes.
I'm much stronger on the movie history than the geological history. I can do that. Filming began in 1920 with Fatty Arbuckle making it. His first feature film was called The Roundup. Actually, we found a surviving copy at the Library of Congress, and one of our patrons made a copy of it. We've been showing it, and it is actually a pretty good film. I was worried, we went to this big thing, we were premiering it again. It actually turned out pretty well. And so that kind of kick-started filming in the Alabama Hills. And at first they didn't have anywhere to stay in town. There was one hotel which was built for the engineers who were doing the LA Aqueduct, and it only had about 20 rooms. So they stayed out in tents in the Alabama Hills, so they really experienced firsthand, the locations that they were using. Not always something they were comfortable doing, perhaps. And then they built a hotel to accommodate them. And then it seemed like there was a great outpouring of people coming up there to film. We don't know all of the films that were in the first 20 or 30 years simply because 80% of the films before 1930, the silent films primarily, are lost, which means we've been very bad stewards of our film history and our culture that way, which is very sad. And so a lot of my research as a film historian has been there. And then guys named Marion Morrison, who you might know as John Wayne, made 12 pictures there. And Roy Rogers, who some of you probably have heard his name, he made 6, and then Gene Autry made 19, and Hopalong Cassidy made 31. And so they all started coming up in the 30s and the early 40s, making B-Westerns. It was common to have people filming there, or even 2 movies filming there each week. There were also some classic films like Gunga Din and Charge the Light Brigade, Lives of Bengal Lancer, Bad Day at Black Rock, until we moved into the 50s when Westerns started to subsiding. And then there was a kind of a drop in production, and then other kinds of films started coming in. Star Trek filmed a couple of the movies, pieces of the movies there, and some of the TV shows. And most recently, people always wonder, well, what's been there? Well, Iron Man shot a lot of their material there. We used to play the Old West, and as film commissioner, I now sell us as the new Afghanistan. Because for some reason, people don't want to go to Afghanistan to film, they go to film in the Alabama Hills. And then most recently, I spent a lot of time with Quentin Tarantino. He has a new film that will come out at Christmas called Django Unchained. And he filmed there for a long time, over 2 periods of time. He doesn't seem to have the same monetary limitations other directors that I know. He's a very interesting guy. And in fact, I got a call on Friday saying, they've been in Louisiana filming, and he said, what does it look like today on the mountains? I assume the question was about snow. Because all the film people really are looking at the Alabama Hills and the whole area as landscapes. And so our job was to try to keep the landscape unchanged, I should say. And the one thing I noticed from the films in the 20s and the 30s to the films now, if I compare them, that there was a lot more plants, a lot more plants growing there. However, sadly, there are a lot more dirt roads as well. And so I set up the stewardship group to kind of start to address some of those issues.
Let me ask you about the Don't Rush the Brush campaign, since we're kind of leading into that. Can you tell me a little bit about that, like the significance of that?
When I became film commissioner, I was already working on building a film museum, which took a long time, and we already had a film festival. And what I discovered as film commissioner is that people from LA, where most of the film people come from, look at a desert plant and go, oh, that's too bad, that's a dead plant. I'll run over it because it's easier for me to go this way than that way. And so I just started saying, you know, we really would like you not to crush the brush. And the BLM heard that, and they really liked it, and they started giving me pins and all different kinds of things. And it was at that time that I was also starting the stewardship group, which is really a grassroots movement from the community. The chamber was involved, the museum, and the film festival, which I was the head of, was involved. The film commission was involved. I represented 2 of the 3. And just people at large who really enjoyed the Alabama Hills. And we started addressing all kinds of issues, mostly restoring areas that got damaged. Now, the movie companies weren't the primary damaging element that I discovered. It's really people, local people, visiting there, and they think, well, this is our land. So if we park our RV over a couple of plants, it won't matter. They're very touchy about that, but I want to get that out there, that it's not always visitors from afar who are doing the kinds of damage that we were addressing.
So the Alabama Hills is currently under the purview of the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, as a national recreation area. But there's also a time where the hills were being described as, or designated as a national monument. What is the future?
I don't know where that national monument thing came, but I did hear talk of it from time to time. I asked the man who owns the McDonald's hamburger restaurants in Lone Pine, Bishop, and Mammoth. I want to say that because it's not a person you would think would step up. And he has invested an enormous amount of time examining all the possibilities for managing the Alabama Hills. We knew we were going to have to address that at some time. We were not particularly anxious to do that because people in our area get very uptight when you mention wilderness. A certain group of people get very uptight when you mention wilderness and what are some other words like that? Protection, conservation. And so I really didn't want my little young organization to get into it. But David Munch is a famous landscape photographer, wrote a letter to Senator Feinstein and said we should really look at this area. And he took a map and he like that. And he included pieces of the Sierra, Mount Whitney. I mean, he's through a huge area. And it was an area that, although it's next to each other, has very different elements and challenges to it. So we said, So we started a discussion with him about it. And I asked Kevin Mizzou, the McDonald's guy, to be a chair of an ad hoc committee to examine all the possible designations we could develop. And one of those designations, I always reminded people, was no designation. So we ended up with 5 designation possibilities and a no designation. And we really spent 2 or 3 years examining and visiting other areas. And we finally settled on, boy, am I shortening this history, but we finally settled on a national scenic designation as the best kind of designation, guaranteeing access for the 40+ user groups that we discovered, and also offering a kind of protection that we thought was necessary for the hills. And so that's kind of how it came, and I forgot what the question was.
We're just
The answer? Yeah. Okay. So we're hoping that Senator Feinstein, we're working with her office right now. Hoping that they will carry the legislation. Clearly, nothing's going to happen until the election that's coming up. And our supervisors, our county supervisors, requested it be an individual, standalone piece of legislation to not be included in anything like desert protection or any of those kinds of things, which is hard because, frankly, the Alabama Hills are not a huge area like some other areas that are involved in protective legislation. But right now, it's looking very good that will happen. And so we hope in a few years we will achieve that designation, and that will allow us a little extra money to help manage. And we're really work a lot with the BLM to manage it and develop a management